This is another Our Nation Sports Show Discord exclusive interview recorded on March the 17th with play-by-play announcer of the NHL's Nashville Predators, Pete Weber.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is another Discord exclusive we are doing for the Our Nation Sports Show. As always, I am joined by Carl and Steven. How are we doing tonight, guys?
Wonderful. Awesome.
And we are being joined today by somebody who is a legend in this industry, who has been doing this stuff for a very long time, and that's Mr. Pete Weber of the Nashville Predators. Sir, how are you doing this evening?
Doing very well, and thank you for pointing out, as I would later, that I am not the bowler, so I can't give any advice on how to convert the 7-10 split.
But first thing I want to get to, obviously, we've been living in the middle of this COVID pandemic for seems like an eternity now. How has it been with you in all of this going on?
Well, I was lucky that a few years ago I would help out when Nashville Soccer Club needed help on their broadcasts, and I did several remote games for them where I was just seeing a screen and my color commentator next to me. Thankfully, it was like a 50-inch screen, so you get a little bit of depth, and they were sending real crowd noise, not NHL, EA Sports 2020 or 2021 down the line to us. So I could generally get excited there. But I think that was, you never know what things you do turn out to be a benefit to you later on. And that was a big help, because what are we doing now for road games? Sitting at Bridgestone Arena and calling the games off a screen. And you want to talk about a challenge. That is a real challenge, because we are then at the mercy of the director in the city involved. Some of them love to linger on close-up shots of players' faces, in which case I don't know where the puck is, why that whistle just blew, or anything. And I try to cover up for that.
Jeez.
Wow.
Carl?
So you started your career back in 81.
72.
72. Okay.
Yeah.
One of our big questions that we ask when we have color commentators on ours, what got you into broadcasting?
As a kid, I grew up in Galesburg, Illinois. And for those not familiar, that's between Peoria and Rock Island in the west central part of the state, located now off I-74, which did not exist as I was growing up. But, and I had this beautiful Zenith tabletop radio next to my bed. And I was a sports nut as a kid. We had 5 newspapers in the house every day from Chicago, St. Louis, Peoria, and Galesburg. And so I would just immediately go to those and avoid those crazy front pages with the crazy news, what's going on with Russia and all that. And among the people that caught my imagination was getting to 1120 KMOX. I was a St. Louis Cardinals fan and a big Stan Musial fan, and listening to Harry Carey and Jack Buck. And I could hear those guys were having fun. Several years later, I found out they were getting paid to have that fun. So why not, if I possibly could, try to pursue something like that? So that's essentially what I did. There was a time as a high school senior where I could not play football. I had pinched a nerve in my neck against a blocking sled. And so I caught on with a local newspaper, the Galesburg Register Mail, taking calls initially on prep sports nights. And then they sent me out to cover my own high school's game. And as it was Costa High School versus Deer Creek Mackinac near Peoria. And that doesn't sound like a big matchup to anybody, but there were 3 different broadcast teams doing the game that night as I crawled up the ladder into that very tiny press box. One of the teams doing the game was also the morning radio combo on one of the local stations in Galesburg. And consider this, they have been up at 3:00 in the morning, Monday through Friday, had finished a day, and then had driven about 60 miles to the Deer Creek Mackinac game site. And they were kind of tired by the time it got to the second half. They had been profusely throwing down coffee to keep them. We didn't have 5-hour energy yet back in 1968. And throwing that down. And, when you do that enough, you pretty much have to go down the ladder at some point and go to the restroom, the outhouse, whatever it was at that point in time. So the play-by-play guy just handed me the mic, says, here, you take it for a while. And here I was a guy that had been listening to all those play-by-play sportscasts. My brother and I did Chet Huntley and David Brinkley back and forth at each other after the NBC nightly news. And so it just took to it, it seemed naturally. And that convinced me. And when I went to college the next year at Notre Dame, I went on the student radio station, and thank God it was a student-run radio station. No professors to tell us what and how to do, and learned a lot by that.
Good old Notre Dame.
I'm another Rudy, just another Rudy. That's all.
Stephen?
So you bring up your time when you got your start at Notre Dame. So what was it like being a student and running, basically the ship and not having that guy like, hey, don't say that, don't say this. Like
Right.
Talk about your time about that. Like, I bet that was a lot of fun, because I know when I was a kid, I was like, man, I want to grow up and be a sportscaster and just, shoot the stuff about sports and just, because I bet that was a lot of fun.
It was, and I was also a morning DJ on the station. There were 40 of us in the sports department, and round the clock, Sunday through Saturday, we did a 5-minute sportscast on the half hour. And among the guys there, Andy Scantlebury, fantastic hockey announcer. Our sports director was a guy named Joe Garziola Jr. And I'm still in contact with him to this day. He was actually my agent for a while after he got into Georgetown Law School.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
So we did that. And by learning on our own, in many ways, I think we may have been more conservative than had there been a professor over our heads, breathing down our necks and don't say this, say that. Because I think we learned better on our own from making our own mistakes, and also like doing an interview at a Notre Dame basketball game with a scout there named Tommy Heinsohn of the Boston Celtics. And I learned while interviewing him, how to eat a hot dog while conducting an interview. Tommy, I would stretch my question out if he still had another bite to go, and then come out with the question. So things like that you can pick up on the side.
Fantastic.
Now, before you got to Buffalo, and we know you did some stuff with the Bills, and before you got to the Supersonics back in the early 80s, you did some minor league stuff. Was that beforehand?
Well, actually, I started, if you will, my minor league baseball career in 1981 with the Albuquerque Dukes. I was with the LA Kings, and I was looking to do baseball. And the guy who was the managing partner of the Dukes, we're not going to talk about isotopes. We're going to talk about the Dukes here. This Pat McKernan was from Western New York and remembered me from my first stint back there and wanted to give me the chance to break into baseball. And I'm so grateful that he did. That it's a little far away here, but my Dukes championship ring, I got spoiled the first year. 93-38. The team hit 325, and they swept through the playoffs, and probably shouldn't have had to go into the playoffs because they were like 21 and a half games ahead of everybody else.
Wow.
So on that team, Mike Marshall at first base. The outfield was Ron Renicky. You know him as a major league manager now. Rudy Law, who had been the National League Rookie of the Year 2 years prior to that. And a 19-year-old kid in right field from Puerto Rico named Candy Maldonado, who hit like 335 that season. Marshall won the Triple Crown. And then on the pitching staff, we had a guy named Alejandro Pena, 19 years of age. He threw a slider plus 90, and his fastball was something else. As a matter of fact, one night, I just had my crowd mic drop down in Vancouver, and I said, well, here's Alejandro Pena coming into the game. And next to hear the smack of the ball into the catcher's mitt, and you heard a fan go, Jesus Christ. I said, well, evidently Alejandro's impressed the fans here in Vancouver with his fastball. But he was a guy that was the midst. That was 81, the major league year that was interrupted by the strike, and the year of Fernando Mania overtaking Southern California and much of baseball. So how was Fernando making his money and getting all the notice? His screwball. So here's Alejandro Pena in the outfield up against the wall before a game, trying to develop a screwball. And, all you need is that opposite action to do that and potentially ruin your arm.
Mhm.
And thankfully, manager Del Crandall was out and saw that and said, Alejandro, you really don't need to do that. You really don't need to. And he went on to a pretty darn good career. Unfortunately, he's in some of those World Series videos as a pitcher for the Braves and going against that buzzsaw that, wore the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah. But you bring up, that obviously we know you've done baseball, you've done hockey, you're obviously doing hockey. Is there one sport in particular that's more difficult to do play-by-play for, or are they kind of give and take depending on the situation?
Yeah, they all have their different challenges, John. There's no question there. Now, I mean, baseball, you have a lot of time to tell stories, so you better have some. In hockey, the way, since it's come back when we lost the season in 04-05 with the speed up rules, the only chance you had to tell stories previously is when the glass would break, and they're replacing that. But I haven't had a glass breakage stop any one of my broadcasts in the last 4 or 5 years. So you just have to be quicker on the discovery and the description and give the geography of where the puck is and who has it. So yeah, all of them have their unique challenges. And thankfully, I think being around the Showtime Lakers was a big help in accelerating my mind, if not my mouth.
Like Carl?
So besides the Albuquerque Dukes, you were also with the Rochester Red Wings.
Yes. Who
How
just
long were
got
you
saved.
with them?
I did a couple of seasons backing up with them. My longest stint was 1983 through 95, being the everyday radio guy for the Buffalo Bisons. And that's where I ran into managers like Terry Collins and the unforgettable Rocky Bridges, better known as Everett Lamar. And he was the guy who always said in the off season, if I needed to call him, he would be at John Stockton's father's bar over in Spokane.
Wow.
Which he referred to as his tea room. Rocky Bridges' tea room. Rocky was one of the funniest people of all. And having been a Brooklyn Dodger, when we would go to Louisville, his old captain would come over and one time did a bit of a game with me, Pee Wee Reese. And to hear those Brooklyn Dodger stories was fantastic.
The late Pee Wee Reese?
Yes.
Wow. Oof. Played with Jackie Robinson.
That's right. And the arm around the shoulder.
Yep. Pee Wee was the first baseman.
Pee Wee was the shortstop. The
shortstop. Jackie was the
became first baseman. And then
correct.
After Jackie's rookie year, this guy who had been a third string catcher became the first baseman. His name was Gil Hodges.
Wow.
Steven?
Talking about your time in Buffalo with the Bills.
Yes.
You were with the Bills for all those great years with those Jim Kelly led teams
And some bad years before, Steve.
Yes.
We did a weekly highlight show, which we didn't need video for. From 1983 through 1985, a weekly half-hour highlight show, and the team was 2-12, 2-14, 2-14. And then they signed Jim Kelly, and by God, they doubled their victory total to 4 that first year with him. So I earned those good years with the Buffalo Bills.
Yes, because you stayed with the team, you stayed true and loyal with the team as far as covering the team. Talk about what was it like, covering the Bills, talk about through the struggles and then all through the good times and making it to those Super Bowls and having those great teams.
Through the struggles was interesting because some of those guys came off those struggling teams and then were with the successful teams. Because they struggled, they were able to draft Bruce Smith. Nobody was paying attention to this young wide receiver from Kutztown, who's now in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Andre Reed. And getting the chance to really know before Jim Kelly got there. Excuse me, I'm going to hang up on this person who doesn't want to use my landline. And to get to know Frank Reich before Jim Kelly came there, and they became such a combo, such a juggernaut offensively. I mean, and including that 84 season. Yeah, the 84 season, they had a guy on the roster who was both the the last ranked passer in both conferences. And that's how bad things were at that time. There was one post-game show where John Holland scored the only Bills touchdown in a game against San Diego, a nice rainy Sunday afternoon in Orchard Park. And he scored the touchdown because it was raining so hard Ralph Peretta, the long snapper for the Chargers, snapped it over the punter's head, and it was recovered in the end zone for the touchdown that day. And that was it. So you had to learn how to focus on certain things, or else you're going to have nothing to talk about.
Oh
Wow.
man, like I bet you were ready to go crazy during the game. You mean to tell me the only touchdown we get in the game is a fumble snap from the punter?
Yes, exactly. But I tell you, Ralph Peretta really sent that thing airborne, that long snap. That was that wet AstroTurf, man. It just, we should have put the stopwatch on it for hang time.
Yeah.
Um,
Now, we talked about your minor league baseball run, your time with the Kings. You also did some basketball
Yes.
as well. You were with the Sonics.
And for a month in Magic Johnson's rookie year, I also doubled up as color on the Kings and color on the Lakers with Chick Hearn, the guy who would hire me to come out there, because
Chick Hearn.
there was the bicycle accident that cost Jack McKinney essentially his job as head coach of the Lakers. He suffered a concussion. So they needed another man to come down to the bench, and that became Pat Riley, who was Chick's color commentator.
Mhm.
And so Chick asked me if I could fill in for Pat as my schedule permitted for that next month. And I did that. And that was absolutely fantastic and led to me being able to do the color with Tony Roberts on Mutual's coverage of those 1980 NBA finals when Magic sat in for Kareem in game number 6 in Philadelphia and had 42 points, 27 rebounds, and just killed Daryl Dawkins. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he played multiple positions during that game and just took him to school. I mean, my goodness. And who would have thought that him getting a concussion, having to step down as head coach for the Lakers, would lead to one of the greatest dynasties of the 80s.
Yeah.
Showtime Lakers.
And then later picked up, of course, by Pat Riley. So I see they've just put somebody into play Pat Riley in it. There's an HBO movie they're making on the Showtime Lakers.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. But Carl?
So you came up with two major catchphrases. The reverse Oz effect. How did that come about?
Well, old Busch Stadium in Indianapolis. Every time I walked into the team offices there, I was thinking I was watching one of those old black and white Perry Mason episodes. And so when I'd walk back out, we'd come to, full Technicolor, looking at the green of the grass and all that. So all I could think of was The Wizard of Oz. When Dorothy woke up, allegedly in Oz, everything had turned color. So I just used that one. And I've used it in other applications, but none more frequently than I did Indianapolis.
Okay. And the second one you came up with was the grassy knoll.
Well, I didn't really come up with that, but I applied it. So that was the grassy knoll from Dealey Plaza in Dallas, the assassination site for JFK. And I can't believe how many European-born hockey players I've taken to Dealey Plaza over the years just to go through all of that. And the grassy knoll was where, conspiracy theorists, Oliver Stone included, thought that maybe the deadly and lethal shots had come from that location rather than the Texas School Book Depository.
Right. Okay.
Which one of my friends referred to, not thinking on the air, as the Texas School Book Suppository. No, I said, no, that's the depository, guys, please.
And then also, too, going back to when you were with the Bills, you also were on the show with Marv Levy.
Yes.
How was it working with him?
Great working with him. As a matter of fact, now, Marv, I think, has advanced many things in sports. And I still talk to him days pre-COVID, every time we go to Chicago. That's where he retired, in his hometown. And because he was hard of hearing, and I think something perhaps had happened during World War II in his service there, when he came back, he had to become expert, and I mean expert, at lip reading. Soon enough, other coaches in the NFL started putting their play cards up in front of their lips when they were speaking on their headsets, afraid that Marv might pick out.
So that's why to this day you see him do this.
Oh yeah, and I think it's more important when we see the catcher pitcher meeting on the mound and there's an interpreter out there, because either the catcher or the pitcher is Japanese or some other foreign extent. They still put it up, and you couldn't figure out what it was if their lips were wide open to the public there. But maybe somebody watching in outer space someplace would have a high definition camera and get the information back to them, or they work for the Houston Astros, one or the other.
Oh, that is tremendous.
That was perfect.
Stephen?
That is tremendous. So talking about the Predators, as far as their good years, we're not going to talk about this year. Man, when they had that tremendous run to the Stanley Cup Finals, man, like Nashville was rocking, man. Like they had, that was an incredible team that year.
Yes, it was. And
Incredible.
yet
team.
the other thing going coincidentally was the annual CMA Music Fest at the same time as the Stanley Cup Final was in town.
Mhm.
So the streets were just jam packed, and free concerts were being given out in the street in front of Bridgestone Arena. So it was, and really the year before, even when the Predators hosted the 2016 NHL All-Star game,
Right.
the downtown, I'm going to call it campus area, became like a hockey Woodstock. There wasn't as much nudity and not as much drug use, but it was a hockey Woodstock. And it was, the people were just reveling in it all. And the players did too. And you talk about, and now in this era where that we're few, if any, fans in the stands, you could really tell the difference of how the players feed off that energy that comes to them from the stands. And I think that started here in April of 2008 when the team was sold and it was stripped down for sale. So they traded away Scott Hartnell, Kimmo Timonen, Thomas Vokoun, didn't re-sign Paul Correa. But yet that team going into the last week of the season needed a big win at home. And there was no asking for this off the scoreboard or from the public address. But at the second TV time out of the third period, down a goal, the fans all got together and just gave a standing ovation and a roar. And they fed off that, scored the tying and winning goals, and got back to the playoffs.
Wow. Now, since you've been with Nashville, you've been with them since they started in 98, right?
Yep. I was there the first day of the first training campus when I reported. Yeah. So September 12th, 98.
Now, in your years of being there, obviously you've gone to many different stadium arenas. What's the one arena that you go to that you always look forward to going to, other than Bridgestone?
Because of my time there, and I wasn't working in that building, but Staples Center in LA. I just loved the vibe in there. And my broadcast partner when I was in LA, Bob Miller, continued on, thankfully, because we were thinking about how we're going to title our highlight videos back in the late 70s, early 80s. And we were thinking of one that the Buffalo Bills used a little bit later on. Years of pain, because those teams, for one reason or another, and basically I'm going to say it was the management style set in forth by the founding owner, Jack Kent Cooke, did not have the wherewithal or the intelligence to put together a good roster. And then Dean Lombardi came on, and thankfully Bob got to call 2 cup winners in 2012, 2014. And I thought that was absolutely fantastic. And I went out there for the finals the first of those years.
Carl?
So let me ask you this: with the current situation we have with the COVID, not saying hockey team wise, but the COVID, now that we're slowly starting to open up again with certain things and fans, right? How does it look to you with the fans coming in at, say, 25% or 30% compared to a full stadium?
It's the heck out of the fake noise being piped in from the hockey video games and so on. And the players have mentioned that they noticed the difference too. From the bubble last summer, and please understand, my understanding of seasons and the calendar right now are obscured by the fact that we've had these long pauses and then come back and have the Stanley Cup playoffs in August and September. But it's made a big difference, I think, where they have let the fans in. I was watching the Ranger game several weeks ago where they first let fans into Madison Square Garden.
Right.
And you could even see, it was embodied in the energy, the body language of the players when they stepped onto the ice.
It was more of about a pride that they have the fans there instead of Oh, okay. Let's just go
Yeah.
shoot.
Right.
I think the thing that I think people are starting to realize now is for so long we took all that stuff for granted, and then in a almost a swoop, all of a sudden it was taken away for so long. So just kind of piggybacking off what Carl was just saying, I think the fact that we're starting to see arenas start to open up again, I think people are starting to like appreciate it more.
I think that's true. And here's the other thing. How confident are they about returning? I mean, because that's varied. That's by an individual basis. And when do you feel confident going back? And I've had both of my vaccination shots, as has my wife. We finished that up a couple of weeks ago. And that automatically made me feel better. I mean, other than after the second shot, I had a sore shoulder. So I wasn't going to throw BP that day. But otherwise, we were fine.
Yeah, they're saying some of the whichever one you get sick for like a day or two or whatever.
And not immediately. It's usually the day after. Yeah. My wife, I had the soreness in the shoulder, and my wife had incredible fatigue the following day. Might have been just cooking for me.
I'll know what it's like on Tuesday for the second shot.
All right, good. Which one are you getting?
Pfizer.
Okay. I was Moderna. So
my parents just got theirs Thursday, and theirs was Moderna.
All right.
I look at it this way. I was against it at first, and I'm like, you know what? Eventually, airlines or whatever we do, they're going to say, oh, were you vaccinated?
Yes.
Just get it over with now.
Exactly.
We're going to get some sort of ID, I think, that we'll have to show.
Yeah, I think we're just going to have to show that card all the time we go.
I think once we get all vaccinated, then once we're all vaccinated, then like when we're going to sporting events or concerts, like, hey, show your card. Here you go. You're done. Good.
Yes. Yeah. Or will they do like I did in college and find a great way to falsify the documentation? Just when I was under 21, people didn't realize if they read my fake ID that my residence was Wrigley Field.
Yes.
That's the address I put down.
Great reference.
Dude, that's phenomenal.
Blues Brothers.
Yes.
Yes.
The Blues Brothers movie. That's one in a set of DVDs I give to my friends' children as they graduate high school, so they can move on in life and learn all of life's necessary lessons in case their parents had not done what they were supposed to have done. So it's Blues Brothers, Airplane, Slapshot, and Animal House. Those are always included.
Wow.
Okay. I'm going to ask this before John does. You're on Twitter, your picture is of you and two guys from Slapshot.
Yes.
Were you part of the movie?
No, but I was Steve Carlson, who's the first one to my left shoulder in that picture, my avatar there. Mm-hmm. We were together when I was working with the LA Kings. He played a year with the Kings.
Okay.
Okay.
So, and then he moved for a long time. He was in San Jose. So whenever the Preds went out to San Jose, we would get together, including a playoff series 5 years ago. But now he is back in Johnstown or Charlestown. And I believe he is coaching his grandkids in hockey there.
Okay.
But Steven?
Going back to your as far as with the Predators, what are some of your favorite games that you have called? Like, man, the crowd was just electric, and they were on their feet, and at home, and just like, because man, hearing that crowd, man, like they are so passionate about their hockey team, like they love their hockey team.
Playoff series, Game 4 with San Jose in 2016, so the year before going to the final, and it's an 8:45 Central Time game start that was imposed upon us by NBC, SN, and the NHL. Mm-hmm. So it's a late start to begin with. Well, we're going into the third overtime. It's after 1 a.m. locally. And then Mike Fisher ends the game at 1:06 with the triple overtime goal to tie the series with San Jose. That is one night I can absolutely never forget. Brent Peterson, formerly an assistant coach, was doing the color with me. But when I called the winning goal, he screamed out in pain because Terry Crisp, my other partner, was squeezing his ribs so hard they were cracking. He was kind of like getting sacked by Bruce Smith at that point in time.
Wow.
Remember the
Wow.
Bruce Smith effect, I think, was best expressed by Joe Montana, his last game with Kansas City, the AFC Championship game in Buffalo. And Bruce got him more than a few times. And his post-game press conference, Joe said, "I'm too old for this."
Yeah.
Wow. Like I bet that was insane being in that press box and just man, I mean just
I was thankful I had these on, Steve,
yes,
because otherwise they don't work for a while.
yes.
That was like my first ever hockey broadcast, Notre Dame at Boston College.
Mhm.
Where did BC put our broadcast location? Directly in front of the BC Pep Band.
Nice.
Oh,
I didn't hear for 3
God.
weeks.
Nice.
And I had to do a game the next night at Harvard.
Wow. And
What the
like
heck did you hear?
Well, it was kind of like you guys are probably too young to remember on Saturday Night Live when Garrett Morris did the news for the hearing impaired.
Yes.
Okay, so it was like that. I had to have my engineer back in South Bend. All right, here's the next commercial. You know, things like that.
Wow.
all right, in 2 minutes, you're coming back live.
Yes. Or there were, of all things, Notre Dame was in the WCHA, and so went to Colorado College, and they played at the
Yeah.
Broadmoor World Arena.
Yeah.
Well, our broadcast lines ran through the hotel switchboard,
What?
and they were very alert to nobody talking during commercial breaks, and they would cut off my broadcast. So ultimately, my producer back in South Bend even got the name of the person running the switchboard, and would call back, and I would get on the air with missing very little, if any, time. But think about that. And then we had a power outage there one night. They came out for the opening skate, and all of a sudden the lights went out in the entire Broadmoor complex, and all I heard was the crashing of glass. And I had seen a big slap shot unleashed before everything went dark, and that glass just crashed, and Lord knows how many people got sprinkled with that.
Wow.
Man,
Um,
just thinking of that game 4, man, and just how
Yeah.
long that game was, and like the entire broadcast team is just losing their minds, and then the crowd is just losing their minds. I mean, I bet
Some
you
would say, Stephen, I never had my mind, but that's okay.
well, apparently you lost your mind when you became a sportscaster. But anyways,
Yes.
Now, when you first joined us before we started this, you had mentioned about how it was the anniversary of you bringing Butch Gorin to
Yeah.
the airport. Can you go into that a little bit? Because me being on Long
Sure.
Island, the Islanders are pretty much like gods on the island. on
and
Long
they
Island.
and deservedly so. I mean, particularly now, my partner here played on that first Islanders team, Terry Crisp, and then they were in Detroit the night of the trade deadline and thought it was all over, so they went out for beers at the old Lindell AC, made popular by Alex Karras in his days. And they said all of a sudden they're at the bar, it's approaching midnight, and the bartender picks up the phone and goes, "Is there anybody here named Crisp?" And Terry goes, "Oh no." So he goes over and picks up the phone, and it was Earl Ingerfield, the Islanders coach. And he said, "Terry, can you come back to the hotel? Earl, we know what's going on. I got traded. Just tell me where." So he told him, "Philadelphia." "Philadelphia? What do they want with me?" Well, what they wanted with him was to give him a couple of Stanley Cup rings, as it turned out. And that's what this story with Butch Goring will go on for too. But the reason Philly wanted him was when Terry had been in the minor leagues with the old Buffalo Bisons, his coach there was a guy named Fred Sherrill. And there was Fred back with the Flyers and wanting somebody who he knew he could count upon to take a face-off if Bobby Clark couldn't go out there and cheat by throwing his butt in the face of the other centerman and pushing the puck back to his winger. Okay, so Butch Goring. I was both the color commentator for the Kings, and we were on a simulcast situation then. And part of the job my first year was to be the traveling secretary as well. Bob Miller was in charge of taking care of player tickets on the road. So we all had multiple duties to perform. So we got the call. The general manager, George McGuire, the Kings, told me, "I've just traded Butchie to the New York Islanders. We're going to get Dave Lewis. coming on, and Billy Harris. But you don't need to pick them up today because they're going to join us tomorrow in Atlanta. I'm going down there to play the Flames. But could you take Butch to the airport today and send him on to meet the Islanders? So I said, sure, because Butch and I were, I think, the kings of sleeping on airplanes. Nobody can fall asleep quicker than we could. And so I took him out to Dorval, and we were talking all the way out about how this could be a real good situation for him. You never dream that somebody's going to win 4 consecutive Stanley Cups, but he sure was the spark, was he not? I mean, yeah, you had the trio grande, Bossy, Achilles, and Trottier, but Butchie gave them a true second threat line, not to mention great penalty killing to join in with Wayne Merrick and so on, because Butchie essentially in the penalty kill replaced Billy Harris.
Mhm.
And that's what happened with him. And that's all the greater glory. And we still talk quite a bit.
Nice.
Carl?
What's the one stadium you hate going to?
Right now, okay, in the NHL.
Yes, sir.
That I hate. I can tell you.
I
about the
shouldn't say
ones that-
hate because hate's a
but
a
not
strong,
fun to work
nasty
in.
word.
Not fun to work in.
Yes, sir.
As much as I love St. Louis, that's a very cast area for us on radio. But and Chicago moved us now to a smaller facility within the United Center. But I'd have to think the one that is the most annoying, and we're no longer, well, we are this year, we're no longer in their division, Columbus, when they fire off that darn cannon every time they score a goal. And when the team comes out to start the game. I've had more than a few people joining me in the booth as my color commentator who were not aware of that. And they had to go change their pants after the teams came out on the ice.
Oh
I mean,
my God.
It was just, total surprise and shock. Like I had doing University at Buffalo basketball, and we went to West Virginia, and my commentator didn't know that they usually had a mountaineer come out and fire off a musket just before the opening tip, and usually right behind the visiting broadcasters.
Oh,
Holy
like
crap.
that's like going to concerts, like
Yeah.
and like what that's like when I went to Motley Crue when I was Cooper in Greensboro in 2014. Okay, I'm used to fireworks now for the most part because I can kind of pinpoint when they're going to happen. Like Kiss's pyro was loud, but
Yeah.
it wasn't Motley Crue loud. It was Motley Crue's pyro was insane. I'm like, holy crap! Like it scared the bejesus out of me. I'm like, oh, and then like Shinedown was playing in Fayetteville, and coincidentally, the first song they play after the intro, during their intro, and then you hear the kid go, "Don't be afraid," and then, pow! I'm like, "Holy cow!" Like you say, "Don't be afraid," and then the first thing you do is fire off fireworks before your first freaking song. I'm like, oh dear God! I mean, I love pyro now because I'm kind of used to it. If I know the band and I know what they're doing, like Metallica, like when I was at Metallica in Atlanta, they had pyro and it wasn't as loud because we were outside, so the pyro had somewhere to go. But in an arena, I sometimes have to brace myself. I'm like, okay, here it comes, bam. I'm like, okay, here it comes, pow. I'm like, all right, but yeah, having that cannon going off, it scared the crap out of the broadcasters.
Well, we were,
man.
when they had the All-Star game in Columbus, 2017, 2018?
Yeah.
They did it for all the goals for both teams.
Oh God.
The final was 17-12.
No.
Just to give you an idea. Yeah. So there are a lot of shell-shocked patrons leaving Nationwide Arena.
Probably all going, what? What'd you say?
Exactly.
Hey, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh my.
One of the loudest concerts I was at was AC/DC when they're like, fire. I'm like, okay. I'm like, all right. I knew that was coming. Fire. I'm like, okay, I knew it was coming, but ow, my ears are hurting.
Yes. The knowledge sometimes makes it even worse.
Yeah.
Oof.
Oof.
One last question I have, and this is actually Brooke, because we have a Discord server that we use.
Yep.
And this question was actually asked earlier in the day that it just kind of dawned on me that I wanted to ask you. If you want to go pull up the question, because it's actually an interesting question. give me 1 second. One of the people who are listening wants to know, what is your advice when watching a game? Because he was told when you watch a game, you don't watch the puck, but you watch the players.
Yeah. Now, a live, I'm going to say that applies better at a game you're at live
Mhm.
rather than when I'm doing a remote game off the television screen. To do that, watching the players, that's how I learned to do baseball. Watching how the fielders reacted to a batted ball that I might have immediately lost sight of, seeing how the infielders react. Now, there are some infielders that are great at deking out somebody when a ball hits the outfield as if they're fielding a ground ball and slowing a base runner down on the paths. But I think that watching what goes on away from the play is, without question, the way to pick up on things and helps you watch the game better overall later.
Carl?
So my last question for you is, as you know, Fox Sports, when they had the hockey, they used to have that little puck tracer.
Yes. First game,
What-
the All-Star game in Boston in 1996.
Yes, sir. How do you feel about them taking that away for the fans at home or a casual fan?
Yeah. I think it helped a lot. And it helped a broadcaster a lot too, especially when the puck was on the boards on your side and you couldn't really see it that well until that electronic enhancement came out and you could see that. Now, the Comet Trail, I've heard so many arguments about it, but the reason it got taken away was the expense. The Fox was doing 4 regional games of the week back then, but they had only one production truck that could handle that special puck. And the puck they cost back in that era, so 25 plus years ago, about $35 to produce, to make them the same weight and have the transmitter in there. And then put the sensors up along the boards. Every 6 feet, there was a receiver. And that's how they produced that effect. So I wouldn't mind seeing that come back. And who knows, NBC still has the right of refusal to join in with ABC ESPN on the new broadcast deal that's just been announced that will take place starting in the fall and go the next 7 years.
Right.
But,
I just saw that. I was shocked.
Yeah. And so, NBC is pulling the plug on NBCSN. They are trying to get us, I think, all to go to their streaming Peacock service.
Yeah, I heard
If
that.
not the old USA Network, to do that way. So let's see what happens there. But if Fox were to come back and do this, and Rupert Murdoch wants to spend the money, buy 3 more trucks, let's see what happens from there. Now,
Yeah.
I do think it's also possible the second half of the package could go to a PBS group of stations, and for the intermissions, they could just do pledge breaks.
Mhm.
And then if you want to see the next period, please, like Soupy Sales did, go to mommy's and daddy's purses and wallets and pull out that green stuff and send it to me, Soupy Sales, ABC 12, New York. Over $10,000 came in then, guys.
Wow.
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 That's one way
Steven?
of making money.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Steven?
And my final question, circling the wagon to the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
I had to throw that in there. What was some of your favorite games covering for the Bills? Because man, there were some great games, obviously during the Jim Kelly era of the Buffalo Bills.
Well, going to the first Super Bowl and beating the Raiders 51-3. And when I was down in the tunnel area before that game and saw Al Davis's chief henchman, if you will, Al Locosal, on, if we can remember this, a payphone in the tunnel at Van
What's
Rich
that?
Stadium. Yeah. And he was on the phone trying to make reservations for Tampa Bay for the next day. Well, as it turned out, before the first quarter was over, those reservations would have been a secondary concern to anything else, other than their deposit they might have had to put down to get them. But that was just, I mean, even one play that shows you how things were going to go the Bills' way, a fumbled snap from center, it bounces right back up into Jim Kelly's hands. Then he rolls left and throws a touchdown pass. I think it went to James Lofton. Yeah, James Lofton, who had been picked up from the Raiders on waivers earlier. So that was fantastic. But the game that everybody refers to in Western New York is still down 35-3.
Yep.
to the Houston Oilers.
Yep.
Midway through the third quarter and coming back to win that game 41-38 in overtime. Now the crowd, many people left at half, and then many more were trying to storm back in when finally they said it's worthless trying to keep people from coming back into the stadium. But I even called our traffic reporter and had him go back up in the air at halftime to do traffic reports for all the people that were leaving. So the faithful few who stayed in that sleetish day in Orchard Park got the big payout on all of that.
Yes.
Mr. Weber, it was an honor.
Mr. was my father. I'm Pete. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, Pete.
It's the sign of respect.
I appreciate that, guys. Appreciate that very much. And I hope I answered most of your questions.
Oh, you did.
Yes,
Oh, you definitely
sir.
did. You definitely did.
Okay. Maybe too
We-
completely.
Hey, that's fine with us. We definitely would love to have you on again at some point.
Sure.
And where can our listeners find you on social media?
At Pete Weber Sports with the Hanson brothers on Twitter, and just Pete Weber on Facebook. I dabbled a bit in Instagram, but I haven't done too much there. And that's Pete Weber Sports also.
Okay, but you can find him all in there. Again, Pete, thank you so much for joining us. For Carl, for Steven, and for P. Weber, I'm John. This has been another Discord exclusive for Our Nation Sports Show. We'll catch you guys on our next one. And until then, see ya.